Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest Aita Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from Miserable-Street-777. Aita for refusing to be with my wife during childbirth or signing the birth certificate until she proves that the baby is mine and that she and my best friend didn't have an affair. My 44M wife Cynthia, 41F, and I have been married for almost 15 years. I raised her older children as my own. We have 2 kids together and one that she just gave birth to. But I won't sign the birth certificate until I get a DNA test. Back in 2014, we had a huge crisis due to her infidelity. Her affair partner was her supervisor, and I only found out when she was abruptly fired. And the company filed a case against her for allegations that I won't discuss here. Her supervisor was a co-defendant. She had to come clean about the whole thing, including having had an affair that lasted 2 years. I completely lost all trust in her. I requested paternity tests on our kids together. They are mine. Got a lawyer and moved out. I eventually forgave her and tried to move on because the pain of breaking up our family and not seeing the kids every day was unbearable. We had a very good run until now. Our relationship felt stronger. The sex was great. I felt like she was the woman that I fell in love with and was very happy that I gave us another chance. Years ago, her best friend Dana, 42F, cut her off. They were friends since grade school, but Dana abruptly ended the friendship, changed her number, and even blocked me and our older kids everywhere. Cynthia expressed sadness about it for years and often talked about Dana like a true sister. When my wife got pregnant with this last baby, she got very depressed about everything. Dana was our go-to person in case of emergency, so I thought maybe some type of closure would help. I managed to get Dana's contact information from a friend in common and asked if she would be willing to talk. To my surprise, she was interested. The conversation wasn't what I expected. She called me a flying monkey and said I ought to be ashamed for enabling my wife. She said she was absolutely fed up with Cynthia and that she abandoned the friendship because she got tired of feeling like a tool, always having to do favors and being generally at my wife's service. She said she was unable to share anything because my wife only talked about herself and that my wife failed to even thank her for gifts and other things, but kept raising the bar and asking for more and more stuff from her. Dana mentioned having attempted a slow fade, but my best friend Gary, 48M, stepped in, and it put her off tremendously. I didn't know this. I didn't know that Gary was sent by my wife to talk Dana out of restricting their time together when her best friend became distant, and that he pressured her and tried to force her to contact Cynthia, and that this resulted in a complaint against him because his messages became menacing and he hinted at sending her spyware. I know Gary can be intense, but never like this. He works in IT, so the spyware part is not entirely impossible. Dana and Gary never had any contact prior to this. Dana cut everyone off out of distrust, and because she did pursue a complaint against him with the authorities. She sent me evidence, the court case number, and receipts. I'm hurt, because not only did he get in trouble for trying to help my wife, but he actually got into a serious situation, and it was kept a secret from me. I confronted him, and he said that he was just trying to help. I confronted my wife, and she said she was desperate because Dana had always been her main support system. This did it for me. I don't care how many times my wife says nothing else was going on. I have no way to erase the idea that they might be hiding other things. The fact that Cynthia managed to get Gary to do something that he knows is illegal, and that he went too far trying to please her, makes me wonder about things. Also, during our entire conversation, Dana insisted that Cynthia is a black hole of a person, and that she was disgusted that not only my wife had been using her for years, but would not think anything of engaging third parties to enable herself to keep extracting benefits for whoever she wants. To make matters worse, I asked if she knew that my wife had cheated, and she said yes, and that it played a part in her disowning her. I will not even be able to go back to talking with Dana because she made it clear that she wants nothing further. Back in the day, I thought Gary looked off, but when I asked, he said it was about him separating from his ex and that he was bummed out. I talked to Cynthia about it. I told her that I reached out to Dana, and what she said. She looked horrified. We went over that for days until I couldn't take it anymore and asked if she and Gary had any time of inappropriate involvement. She reacted, angry, and seemed very offended. Also, Now I feel that maybe her depression over Dana wasn't real. Maybe she wanted to use that so that I could accommodate her with whatever she wanted. I requested a paternity test on the baby, and she flat out said no. She threatened to divorce me. This is why I moved out weeks before she gave birth. I refused to drive her to the hospital or be at the birthing room. All I'm asking is for confirmation that it's my child, and she isn't acting cooperative. She tried to deny Dana's complaint to the authorities, despite me offering evidence. Gary has apologized for keeping secrets, but he's denying ever sleeping with her. I'm anxious, but sometimes I get very numb and wonder if I'm being crazy. I understand that Dana was very right to act the way that she did, but I have no evidence of cheating or an affair between Cynthia and Gary. This has affected my health, and sometimes I feel that the less I see or hear from Cynthia, the less chances to get an anxiety or panic attack. Obviously, my family knows that we are separated and are showing divided opinions. Some say that I was impulsive and that I'm jumping to conclusions. They didn't know about her cheating years ago. I'm not meeting the new baby until she can prove my paternity. She's having health issues related to post-birth. I'm present for my kids and haven't skipped on my duties, but told her to either have a relative come help her out or move to their place temporarily because I will not be helping her in any way until this is resolved. She says that I'm being abusive and that being alone in the maternity ward was humiliating. Aita? Edit. My wife says she won't agree to the DNA because I'm ruining our marriage. OP is not an AH for demanding a paternity test, and his demand is completely justified given the doubt revolving around the paternity of the baby. OP's wife is an AH for being unfaithful in their relationship and now refusing to have a DNA test. So I would rate OP's wife 3.5 out of 5, and OP gets a 0. Let's now move on to the next story from Lululu22. Boyfriend gave his friend my place at our holiday reservation without asking me, Aita. Me and my BF booked a flight with Holiday Finder to fly to Bucharest on the 14/11. Later on, we asked to change the flight dates so that only him will fly on the 14/11, and I will join him on the 17/11. This is because we broke up about 2 to 3 weeks prior to the flight, then got back together, and I didn't want to go with him anymore because it was too long of a trip for me because the relationship was unstable, so we changed it, so he'll fly on the 17th, which made me be okay with the length of the vacation. Even though I would have preferred not to go at all, but when me and him booked the flight, he made me promise that no matter what I would go with him on it, even if we break up. And I said okay, but only if we break up on good terms, as in not because of cheating or fighting to the point we hate each other. For me, we fought a lot and hard, and I was really tired from all of this, hence why I didn't want to go. But I remembered the promise I made, so that's why I told him I'll still go just at a later date. The time came, and he went on his flight, and he asked me a day later to let him know as soon as possible what my decision is whether I was coming or not, because it weighs on him not knowing. There was doubt whether I was coming or not, because we fought 2 days before he flew as well, and I said I will. On his first day in Bucharest, he sent me pics, and we talked like always, but then he asked to call me because he's RLI stressed, and I said okay, and he called and said he was on the street alone, and 2 dudes started getting close to him and harassing him for money for like 10 mins. He told them he doesn't have any, and ran off to a street with people. And this entire thing made him RLY stressed. We talked about it. And then, at some point, he asked me what I did before we called, and I said, my mom asked me to do something, but you said you were stressed, so I wanted to talk to you first. I was celebrating my mom's birthday, and he knew that. When he heard that, he said that it's fine and I can go, and I made sure 3 times before I went that he really is fine, and he said he is, and that he'll call his friend, Amit, and I ended the call with saying that if he needs me, he can always call me. Sometime later, he calls me again, 1 or 2 hours later, and I answer, and he opens the call with, hey, my name, listen, I thought about it. Can you please not come on this holiday? And I was shocked he said that, but regardless, I only asked him why, because maybe he was going to say that he only wants me to come if I really want to come, and he wants to fix our relationship starting off good. But his answer was, I talked to Amit about the incident. He saw how stressed out I was, and he asked if I want him to fly to me, and I said yes. He found a flight 3 hours away from now, packed up, and is on his way to the airport. I want to give him your space in the hotel room. I was really mad he said that. He didn't even ask me about how I felt about all of this, and if this is okay by me when I'm the one who planned this whole thing. I answered him that I need to think, and we were quiet on the call for about 2 mins until I answered him in an angry tone. Okay, but tell Amit to transfer me the money for the hotel. Then my boyfriend started shouting at me, telling me not to shout at him, which I didn't. I just spoke in an angry tone. He answered me, I'm not going to take money away from Amit after he was such a great friend, and booked a flight just to come be with me because I'm stressed out. And why does it matter? You didn't want to come on this holiday anyways? I answered him that he doesn't know whether I wanted to come or not. He told me to give him an answer when I had one, and if I didn't tell him I wasn't coming, it means I was thinking about coming. I also said that, truth to be told, I was leaning more towards coming, which I was, even though I wasn't at the start, and that what he just asked of me is so ridiculous, disrespectful, and even still, I agreed. The only thing I asked for was my money back, since he is literally telling me not to come on this holiday that I paid for, which I think is a very reasonable thing to ask. And from there, it just went into a downward spiral. And we fought for a very, very long time over the phone with him screaming and shouting and cursing me, and me the entire time keeping a cool head and only sometimes using an angry tone. The whole time he was on speaker, and my mom heard it all, so I have a witness to his behavior and to mine. It ended with him breaking up with me, because according to him, he was trying so hard for this relationship, which, by the way, he kept hanging up on my face and then calling back again a few minutes after, which is, I guess, what he considered trying. Hanging up on me on my face after screaming and then calling back again. I told him I still want to try for this relationship, and he said someplace and him wants to as well. But it's a self-sabotage place, like the same place that makes him want to smoke a joint. It ended by me telling him, okay, listen, whatever decision you'll make next is what will happen between us. Tell me to either come on this flight or not. And he told me not to. And we broke up. He was very rude to me even after when transferring me the money for the hotel, and a day after when he needed help regarding check-in for the hotel, which I helped him with, and he didn't even say thank you, just left me on read. OP is not an AH for asking for her money back. OP's boyfriend is an AH for disrespecting her and refusing to return the money despite making an agreement. OP's decision to break up with him is completely justified. So I would rate OP's boyfriend 3.5 out of 5, and OP gets nothing. Let's now jump onto the next story, from mobile_extent_8504, Aita, for cutting off my sister. After what she said about people with schizophrenia. This has been eating at me, and I really need some perspective. I, 26F, have schizoaffective disorder. For those who don't know, it's a complex condition that combines symptoms of schizophrenia, like hallucinations and delusions, with mood disorder symptoms such as depression or mania. I've worked hard to manage it with therapy and medication, and while it's not easy, I've been able to lead a pretty normal life. Only a handful of people know about my diagnosis, including my sister, 28F, because of the stigma attached to it. A couple of weeks ago, I went out to dinner with my sister and a small group of friends, including one of my co-workers. The evening started fine, but things took a horrible turn when someone brought up a news story about a violent crime allegedly committed by someone with schizophrenia. It opened the floodgates for the group to start making cruel jokes about schizophrenia and mental illness in general. The conversation got darker when my sister, who knows about my diagnosis, started saying things like, honestly, people with schizophrenia are just dangerous. The world would be better off without them. At first, I thought, or hoped, she was joking. But she kept going. Laughing, she said, if we just gave them the death penalty, it would solve so many problems. The rest of the group laughed along, adding their own comments. One friend chimed in about how creepy and unpredictable schizophrenics are, and another joked about how they shouldn't be allowed to live near normal people. I was sitting there, frozen, feeling like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. My sister glanced at me during this, her face unreadable, but she didn't stop. If anything, she seemed to double down. Eventually, I couldn't stay silent. I interrupted and said, you all have no idea what you're talking about. People with schizophrenia are human beings, and this is disgusting. My voice was shaking, and I could feel the tears welling up, but I couldn't stop myself. The table went quiet for a moment, before my sister smirked and said, relax, it's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. I told her it wasn't funny, that it was hateful and cruel, and she just rolled her eyes. That's when Sarah, one of the other friends, jumped in and said, well, the statistics don't lie. You can't deny they're dangerous. The group started defending themselves, acting like I was overreacting. My sister didn't say a word to back me up. Instead, she joined in saying, "Yeah, it's not like we're wrong. You're being dramatic." At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. I left the restaurant in tears. Nobody followed me or tried to reach out afterward. A few days later, I found out why. My sister texted me, saying she told the group about my diagnosis after I left. She claimed it would clear the air and help them understand why I'd reacted so strongly. But instead of apologizing or reaching out, they all blocked me on social media, including the co-worker who quit her job shortly after. I can't help but feel like my diagnosis, and the stigma around it, played a role in her decision. When I confronted my sister, she was dismissive. She said I was being too sensitive, and that I didn't technically have schizophrenia because I have schizoaffective disorder. When I explained how hurtful and dehumanizing her comments were, she brushed it off saying, "It's not the same thing. You're overreacting." I told her I couldn't trust her anymore, and since then, I've cut contact with her completely. Now my family is saying I'm being immature, and that it's wrong to abandon family over a misunderstanding. My mom said, "Your sister didn't mean anything by it, and you're the one who made a scene." My dad thinks I should just let it go because everyone makes mistakes. I don't feel like this was a misunderstanding or a simple mistake. My sister knew exactly what she was doing. She knew about my diagnosis and still made those cruel comments, then told people about something deeply personal without my permission. I feel betrayed and completely alienated from my family. But now, I'm starting to wonder if I'm in the wrong. So Aita? OP is not an AH for going no contact with her sister. OP's sister is an AH, a big AH for sharing OP's private diagnosis without her consent. It is unethical and disrespectful to OP. So I would rate OP's sister 3.5 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Historical Piece 42. 51. Aita for accusing my sister of making her childhood trauma part of her identity after she confided in my MIL at my baby shower. I, 29F, married to my high school sweetheart, and am 7 months pregnant with our first baby. I had a strange childhood, to say the least. I had 2 kind parents and an older brother, 34M, and sister, 31F. My parents are very successful financially, and so I always went to the best schools and had all the material things I needed. My childhood would have been perfect had it not been for my mom's creepy brother. He lived nearby and was a great uncle on the surface. However, he abused me from ages 7 to 12 and was quite manipulative and successful at keeping me quiet. For example, he told me I'd get in trouble if my parents found out and even threatened to hurt my older sister if I told anyone about the abuse. My senior year of high school, my older sister had a breakdown and was hospitalized because she was having suicidal thoughts. She told my parents that she was molested by our uncle and that she couldn't get the terrible memories out of her head. My parents sat me down and asked if I had been abused, and I came clean about what happened. After the word got out, some of my female cousins said they were also abused. The police were called, and my uncle was eventually convicted of possessing and distributing illicit images of children. It's a long story, but he pleaded guilty to the charges involving the images in exchange for the molestation charges being dropped. Although coming forward was a horrible experience, I do feel lucky that my parents believed us and also paid for us to go to therapy to work through the trauma. My sister and I have handled the abuse completely differently. My sister is very vocal about what happened to her and always says that the abuse has shaped her as a person. She's now a prosecutor and admirably has made it her life's mission to protect kids who are abused. I, on the other hand, am very private about what happened to me. Outside of my family and best friend, my husband is the only person I've spoken to about the abuse. I hate talking about it because I'm fearful people will view me differently or that they'll worry unnecessarily. I truly just want to move past what happened and not let it define my life or relationships. However, since my sister has been so vocal about what happened in our family, a lot of people close to her know what happened to me. For example, she wrote about our family's story in her law school admissions essay and has confided in her husband and friends. A few years ago, I told my sister that I don't want to prevent her from sharing her story, but I don't like that so many people know I'm an essay victim. I know she feels guilty and blames herself for my abuse since she waited so long to tell my parents, and I was exposed to a predator in the meantime. I've assured her that I don't blame her, but I know the guilt is still there. so I don't mind her taking about my abuse with her husband and closest friends. However, I've asked her to be selective in the people she shares with, and my sister has agreed to stop telling others that I was abused when she shares her story. My mom threw me a baby shower this weekend, since my husband and I would be in town for Thanksgiving. We came early to celebrate. The baby shower was yesterday, and I had a great time. My sister was emotional for most of the afternoon and was telling everyone that I'm going to be a great mom. I thought it was sweet at the time. This morning, I got a call from my MIL asking to meet me for coffee. When I got there, my MIL was in tears. She told me she was having a conversation with my sister at the baby shower, and she asked my sister if it's hard to do the work she does as a mother. My sister said it's hard, but it's something she's always wanted to do, and proceeded to share her story with my MIL. My MIL asked if I was exposed to the uncle, and my sister said everyone in my family was. She asked if he abused me, and my sister said it's my story to tell. My MIL said I didn't have to share, but mentioned she's worried about me and wants to know that I'm okay. I told my MIL that I was also a victim, but she doesn't need to worry since I've gone to therapy and have worked through it. I told her I don't like talking about it, because I don't want that experience to define me, or for anyone to worry about me unnecessarily. The issue is that my MIL is a total fixer. She's a nurse, and naturally helps people in her career. But I've noticed she also befriends people who are going through difficult times. For example, one of her new friends is in the middle of a divorce, and another recently lost her daughter to cancer. When I told my husband about the conversation with my MIL, he warned me that his mom is going to want to take me under her wing now that she knows about my trauma. About an hour ago, a card and a bouquet of roses arrived at my parents' house for me. I know my MIL means well, but the sympathy and attention is my worst nightmare, and her reaction is the exact reason why I don't talk about the abuse. I called my sister and asked why she thought it was appropriate to share our history of abuse with my MIL, my baby shower. My sister said she only shared her story, and I was the one who decided to tell my MIL I was also. I said that while my sister didn't technically say I was abused, it was obvious when my MIL asked, and my sister said it wasn't her story to share. My sister said that she didn't know how to answer my MIL's question and didn't want to lie, and so it was the only thing she could think of at the time. I said she didn't need to raise the abuse at all with my in-laws, and said it wouldn't her to avoid talking about it with people who are close to me. This made my sister angry, and she said she can share her story with whoever she wants, and she won't be shamed into keeping quiet by anyone. I said, it's not about me trying to silence her, but about her having some respect for my feelings and privacy around my inner circle. My sister accused me of being in denial and wanting to pretend the abuse never happened. I said I'm not in denial, but I also don't want sympathy and attention because of what happened to me. I said that I don't want to make the abuse part of my identity because I want people to see me for who I am now. My sister asked if I was accusing of her making the abuse part of her identity, and I said yes, since she couldn't even go one afternoon without letting someone know why she's a prosecutor and wants to protect kids. My sister hung up the phone in tears. My mom is upset and says I owe my sister an apology. She says that my sister has been through a lot, and it's admirable that she uses her abuse as motivation to help other kids. I agree, but I still don't know why she needed to share with my MIL. Aita? OP is not an AH for setting her boundaries. Rather, OP's sister is an AH for sharing her traumatic story without OP's consent with her mother-in-law. OP's reaction is completely justified. So, I would rate OP's sister 2 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from Raiden Bones. Aita. For lecturing my grandmother in her own house? TL. I tried explaining to my grandmother that her actions towards my twin sibling, who is recovering from an eating disorder, is super harmful, but it led to a house-wide fight instead. So, backstory is needed here. Me, my twin, and my mother were kicked out of our previous home by our then roommate for a plethora of reasons not pertaining to us. While we had time to pack, until the end of the year, him threatening us and his ownership of a gun led us to the decision to leave as fast as possible. We have been living with my mom's parents, my grandparents, for a little under a month now. They very much have a traditional way of thinking when it comes to certain issues. One of these issues being eating disorders. It is important to note that while I have never had an eating disorder, my mother and twin sibling both had eating disorders in the past, my twins lasting upwards of 5 years. For them, it is still an uphill struggle, but they are trying their best, and we are supporting them every step of the way. Their eating disorder was extreme, leading to unhealthy weight loss within a few months, and it was bad enough that they had to cross out nutrition facts and calories on the food we had. Yesterday, my sibling bought buldak. If you don't know what buldak is, it is a Korean cup noodle that is incredibly spicy and delicious, even for someone as spice intolerant as me. Like most cup noodles, it isn't the healthiest snack, but my sibling wanted to treat themselves. It is also important to note that the stress of the move made it so none of us had the energy to cook meals for a long time, leading to us eating a decent number of takeout. And in the nicest way possible, my grandmother isn't the best cook, which she knows but still makes food anyway. Her food has made me nauseous on multiple occasions. It is also important to note that the takeout we get is healthier than the alternatives, and this is relevant to the story. Anyway, my sibling goes down to the kitchen to make their noodles, and my grandmother just so happened to be in the kitchen at the time. I had told my sibling I would be down to accompany them in a few minutes, as I was trying to find an app on the App Store, which I regret not going down with them as soon as they asked. My grandmother saw the bright pink bowl in my sibling's hands, and decided it would be a great life lesson to read out the nutrition facts and talk about how unhealthy it is. She proceeded to force it out of my sibling's hands, think of two kids fighting over the same toy, to read out the nutrition facts word for word. My sibling was receptive at first, since they knew about the nutrition facts already, but the straw that broke the camel's back was the lecture they got about how unhealthy it was. This forced them to admit to their eating disorder and how they're still recovering, but our grandmother still continued with her rant anyway. I came downstairs a minute or so after the rant ended to find my sibling crying, so I took over making their noodles for them. As my sibling was upstairs telling our mom about what happened, I was making the noodles and trying to explain to my grandmother why what she did was harmful. A good note to add is that she does not like admitting to her mistakes, such as barging into our room as soon as we woke up and getting mad at my sibling and I for something our mother did, and not apologizing for it after our mother told her so. My grandmother said, and I quote, "Every teenager has gone through an eating disorder phase, and how it isn't that serious. As I mentioned before, I have not, but I did not bring that up as it is not relevant. I tried explaining to her that a phase isn't the same as suffering for 5 years, but I guess she overheard my sibling and mom talking, and got upset at something my sibling said, or rather didn't say. As soon as my mother came downstairs to confront her, my grandmother started calling out for my sibling. When asked why, she said, 'I'm not going to tolerate being called a f-.' Understand that was never even said, and what my sibling said was, 'I just wanted to eat my noodles.' My mother was confused, telling her that my sibling never even referred to her as anything besides their grandmother, which seemed to calm her down a bit. My grandmother begins ranting to my mother about how I lectured her in her own house about something that didn't even matter. And I guess the conversation was heated enough that my grandfather decided to start yelling at my mother for her parenting habits, talking about how we always order food and never eat at the table. This ended up fostering an incredibly hurtful fight between my mother and him, with lots of screaming and aggressiveness. Mind you, I was just trying to finish making the noodles for my sibling. The screaming match ended up making me cry as well, since it brought back memories to my childhood, where my father was abusive emotionally and physically. I have grown up with an intense fear of men because of this, specifically men yelling. My grandparents know about the abuse and our fragile mental states surrounding it. The fight ended with my grandfather calling my mom a bad mother and their grandchildren both having panic attacks. My grandfather ended up apologizing, but my grandmother is steadfast in her decisions yesterday. So, Aita? OP is not an AH for standing up for her siblings. OP's grandmother is an AH for not understanding OP's concern for her siblings. OP is just trying to ensure the well-being of her sibling, and her reaction is completely reasonable. So I would rate OP's grandmother 2 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye. See you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.